Critical literacy, at least as a term, has been around since the 1990s, but I didn't hear about it until I was taking a class on education in college. Is this because my teachers didn't encourage critical thinking? I don't think so. Still, as far as I can tell, it's a term that still lives mostly in the realm of professional educators. As a result, there are lots of people, teachers and non-teachers, who might not have a clear idea of what its goals are or how it is to be practiced and taught in the classroom. However, there is no lack of resources to help clarify what critical literacy means and what it can look like on the school level. One of the founding fathers of critical literacy, though I don't know that he ever used the term, is Paulo Freire. He published a book co-authored with D.P. Macedo titled Literacy, Reading the Word and the World. The subtitle here, Reading the Word and the World, is perhaps the most concise definition of critical literacy there is, and gets brought up frequently in connection with it. But what, you might say, does that mean? Based on my reading of several scholars, I understand it to mean that students should not only understand words, but the structures that live around those words and are represented by them. So critical literacy isn't just about examining text critically. It invites students and teachers to examine their world critically and compare it to texts. But when put like that, critical literacy might not sound profound at all. Teachers have been asking kids to make connections between the text and the world for decades. Importantly, the idea goes much farther. As defined by Sean Anthony Robinson, who was a senior research associate at the University of Wisconsin-Madison at the time he wrote this, critical literacy is having the ability to read texts in an active, reflective manner to better understand power and inequality. He continues, moreover, critical literacy encourages readers to question, examine, or dispute the power relations that exist between readers and authors. You'll notice that this author mentioned power. Critical literacy, far from being about simple connections, is about evaluating the structures of power that define many parts of our lives. Critical literacy isn't really just about connecting the text to the world, ourselves, and other texts. It's about questioning the text and questioning the connections it has to the world. It's about realizing that the author has a goal, then evaluating how they use language to attempt to achieve that goal. As Miami University professor Kathleen Batchelor put it, it is engaged to encourage students to use language to really question their everyday world experiences. In particular, the relationship dynamic between language and power. And it goes even farther. As Margarita Felipe Fajardo, who, when she wrote the article I refer to, was a doctoral student at the University of Wollongong, Australia, observes, advocates of critical literacy have provided students with avenues to take social action. What's more, it's connected to democratizing education by bringing into the class out-of-class literacies. In particular, recognizing and critically looking at what scholars call non-print or multimodal texts, which include everything from video games and television to paintings and dance. Furthermore, as Batchelor puts it, it views text and education as a socio-political system that either privileges or oppresses. This allows students to examine how every form of communicating meaning carries socio-political connotations, and also trains them to critically examine things in their everyday lives that they might have simply taken for granted. Finally, critical literacy is a practice that can be applied in essentially every classroom, from the more obvious disciplines like English and social studies to the supposedly more non-political ones like mathematics and English language learning. For example, a scholar I've already quoted, Fajardo, has argued for including critical literacy in English language learning classrooms. Since, as Kathleen Batchelor reminds us, critical literacy posits that text and education are never neutral, any classroom can benefit from examining their own place in education through what Fajardo calls critical pedagogy, which process, she says, includes that through a discussion of socio-political issues, educators help students in seeing themselves within the larger historical, political, cultural, economic structures where student voices exist. Now, what might this pedagogy actually look like? I can hardly begin to say. The possibilities are as varied as the communities where education takes place. Besides, the intricacies of how one might go about this are way beyond the scope of this project and my current education. However, it begins with examining our own classrooms and our own curricula, and asking how power structures are built into the way we think, write, and teach. As a final thought, in the spirit of critical literacy, I offer a critique of critical literacy. Critical literacy has the potential, when taken to an extreme, to encourage people to excessive suspicion. It could also lead people to the conclusion that the only way to overcome oppression is to reverse the direction of oppression. That simply puts us on a seesaw of power and violence, where only one person can be up at a time, instead of establishing constructive ways forward where both parties, oppressed and oppressor, are healed and redeemed and learn to build community together. While practicing critical literacy can help us come to understand and question the ways that texts and people work in the world, it does not help us at all if it lands us believing in nothing, having reduced humanity's most profound ideas and most true beliefs to mere political propaganda or bids for power. A worldview that aims primarily to figure out how everything is a tool of oppression is at risk of missing the point and the joy of both education and life. I believe, as Parker Palmer suggested, that compassion is even more important than curiosity when it comes to learning the truth about the world. So, critical literacy can be a tool, an important one, for freeing minds and breaking through stereotypes, a catalyst for coming to understand our broken world and the broken communities that make it up, and a starting point for learning to live better lives within them. I hope we will intentionally and conscientiously use it that way. I thank the podcast material of Sierra Gray, Jessica Enlow, Courtney Wood, and Vivian Vasquez, as well as articles by James O'Barbre and Hilary Jenks that I listened to or read while preparing for this podcast, but did not quote or cite directly. I think every little bit helped me to see different approaches to critical literacy. I also thank Helen Fox, who helped me gain a little more context on Freire. Thank you.